Part 1, The Masquerade Ball of Destiny. The Grand Celestial Masquerade Ball was a spectacle unlike any other. Held in the heart of the Galactic Confederation's embassy, the event brought together beings from countless worlds. The air was thick with the hum of exotic languages, the clink of crystal glasses, and the soft glow of bioluminescent decor. Kale, a human diplomat, stood near the edge of the room, adjusting his bow tie nervously. As Earth's newly appointed cultural attaché, he was still getting used to the surreal nature of these gatherings. His eyes scanned the crowd, taking in the array of masks, some elegant, others bizarre, all hiding the true identities of their wearers. Then he saw her. Zyra stood by a towering window, her lavender skin glowing under the starlight. Her dark, flowing gown hugged her figure, and her golden mask shimmered with intricate patterns. She was breathtaking, a vision of otherworldly beauty. As if sensing his gaze, she turned slightly, her eyes meeting his. Even through the mask, her gaze was intense, magnetic. She raised her glass in a subtle toast, a small smile playing on her lips. Kale's feet moved before he could think. He approached her, his heart pounding. "I don't believe we've been introduced," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Zyra," she replied simply, her voice melodic and slightly accented. "A pleasure to meet you, Kale." They fell into easy conversation, discussing everything from Earth's art to the latest advancements in interstellar travel. Zyra's intelligence and wit captivated him, and before long, they found themselves on a secluded balcony, the three moons of Centaur Prime casting a silvery glow over the alien cityscape. "You're different from the others," Zyra said softly, turning to face him. "Most humans I've met are so reserved around non-terrestrials." Kale shrugged, offering a crooked smile. "Maybe I'm just naturally curious. Or maybe it's the champagne." She laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Oh, I rather think it's more than that." Her fingers brushed against his arm, sending a jolt of electricity through his body. "Would you like to get out of here? I know a much more interesting venue nearby." A voice in the back of his mind whispered caution, but the warmth in her eyes and the chemistry between them proved impossible to resist. "Lead the way," he said. The night that followed was a blur of stolen kisses and passionate embraces. They ended up in her private suite at the Stellar Spires, a luxury hotel that catered to the embassy crowd. Even as clothes were shed, Zyra kept her mask firmly in place. "The mask stays on," she whispered against his lips. "It's traditional for my people during intimate encounters." Kale was too caught up in the moment to question it. Besides, there was something undeniably erotic about the mystery. When she assured him she was infertile, apparently common among her species, he let his last reservations fade away. Hours later, as dawn painted the alien sky in shades of green and gold, Kale dressed quietly while Zyra slept. He left his private calm frequency on her nightstand, hoping but not expecting to hear from her again. Such encounters were common enough in diplomatic circles, passionate but ultimately fleeting. He had no way of knowing that this particular liaison would change his life forever. Part 2, The Secret Behind the Mask. 3 months later, Kale sat in his office at the Earth Embassy, reviewing trade agreements. His holographic display chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender's ID was encrypted, but something about the signature pattern made his heart skip a beat. "Kale," Zyra's voice filled the room, though only as an audio transmission. "I need to see you. It's important." He straightened in his chair, adjusting his collar. "Zyra, I've thought about you. Is everything all right?" A pause. "We need to talk in person. Please come alone." The transmission ended, leaving Kale with a knot of anticipation in his stomach. He spent the rest of the day distracted, his mind wandering to their night together, to the mystery of her masked face, to the electricity that had sparked between them. The Stellar Gardens was an exclusive establishment, famous for its absolute privacy. Booth 13 was tucked away in a corner, screened by bioluminescent plants that shifted colors with the mood of nearby conversations. Zyra was already there, her mask still in place. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," Kale replied, sitting across from her. "What's going on?" Zyra took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The words hit Kale like a thunderbolt. "But, you said you were infertile." "I was. At least, I thought I was." She hesitated, her hands trembling. "There's something you need to know about my species, about me." And so began the unraveling of a cosmic mystery, one that would change their lives and the fate of the galaxy forever. Part 3, The Unexpected Revelation. Kale stared at Zyra, his mind racing. The words, "I'm pregnant," echoed in his ears, but they didn't make sense. She had been so certain that night, so confident in her infertility. Now, sitting across from her in the dimly lit booth of the Stellar Gardens, he felt the ground beneath him shift. "How is this possible?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zyra's hands trembled as she clasped them together on the table. Her golden mask glinted under the soft glow of the bioluminescent plants, but her eyes, those piercing, otherworldly eyes, betrayed her fear. "I don't know," she admitted. "My people, we've been barren for generations. It's why our population is dwindling. But this changes everything." Kale leaned back, trying to process the information. "What does this mean for us? For you?" Zyra hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "It means I'm in danger," she said quietly. "If anyone finds out about this, they'll come for me." "For us? Who?" Kale's voice sharpened. "Who would come for you?" She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. "The Barren Collective. They've been monitoring my species for decades, studying our decline. If they discover I'm pregnant, they'll stop at nothing to take the child. They'll see it as a scientific breakthrough, a way to reverse our extinction. But they won't care about me, or the baby. They'll dissect us both to understand how this happened." Kale's stomach churned at the thought. "We won't let that happen," he said firmly. "We'll protect you. Both of you." Zyra's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You don't understand, Kale. The Barren Collective is powerful. They have resources, influence. If they want something, they'll get it. And now they'll want this." Kale reached across the table, taking her hands in his. Her skin was cool, almost electric to the touch. "We'll figure this out," he said. "Together. But you need to tell me everything. No more secrets." Zyra nodded, her grip tightening on his hands. "There's more," she said. "Something I haven't told you about my species. About why we wear these masks." Kale's curiosity piqued. He had always wondered about the mask, about the mystery it represented. "Go on," he urged. Zyra took a deep breath. "The masks are more than just tradition. They're a symbol of our identity, but they also serve a practical purpose. My species, we emit a subtle pheromone, one that can influence those around us. The masks help contain it, control it. But that night, with you, I didn't want to control it." Kale's eyes widened. "Are you saying?" "Yes," Zyra interrupted. "The pheromones played a role in what happened between us. But it wasn't just that. There was something else, something deeper. A connection I've never felt before. And now I believe it's why this happened. Why I'm pregnant." Kale sat back, his mind reeling. The implications were staggering. If Zyra's pregnancy was the result of some unique connection between them, it could mean their child was something extraordinary. Something the Barren Collective would stop at nothing to obtain. "We need to leave," Kale said suddenly. Get you somewhere safe. Somewhere they can't find you. Zyra shook her head. It's not that simple. The Voron Collective has eyes everywhere. If I disappear, they'll know something's wrong. They'll come looking. Then we'll fight, Kale said, his voice firm. I won't let them take you. Or our child. Zyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, Kale saw a glimmer of hope in them. You really mean that, don't you? With everything I have, Kale replied. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. Finally, Zyra spoke again. There's one more thing, she said. Something you need to know about the child. Kale leaned forward, his heart pounding. What is it? Zyra hesitated, as if unsure how to phrase it. My people, we're not like humans. Our biology is different. Our children, they develop quickly. Faster than you can imagine. Kale frowned. What are you saying? I'm saying, Zyra replied, her voice steady, that this child won't take 9 months to be born. It'll be here in weeks. Maybe less. Kale's breath caught in his throat. Weeks. They had weeks to prepare, to protect Zyra and the child from the Voron Collective. It was an impossible timeline, but he knew they had no choice. We'll start tonight, Kale said, his mind already racing with plans. We'll find a safe place, gather resources. Whatever it takes. Zyra nodded, her resolve hardening. Thank you, Kale. For everything. As they left the stellar gardens, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to change in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. The child Zyra carried was more than just a miracle, it was a beacon, one that would draw the attention of forces far beyond their understanding. And as they stepped into the neon-lit streets of the alien city, Kale knew one thing for certain, he would do whatever it took to protect Zyra and their unborn child. No matter the cost. Part 4, The Galactic Conspiracy. The neon lights of the alien city flickered as Kale and Zyra moved through the crowded streets. The air was thick with the hum of hovercrafts and the chatter of countless species, but Kale barely noticed. His mind was focused on one thing, keeping Zyra safe. They had spent the last few hours gathering supplies and mapping out a plan. Zyra had suggested they head to the outskirts of the city, where the Voron Collective's influence was weaker. But even there, they knew they wouldn't be completely safe. We need to find a way off this planet, Kale said as they ducked into a narrow alleyway. Somewhere the Voron Collective can't reach us. Zyra nodded, her golden mask glinting under the dim light. There's a transport hub on the other side of the city. If we can get there, we might be able to secure passage to a remote colony. Kale frowned. Might? Zyra hesitated. The Voron Collective monitors all major transport routes. We'll need to be careful. Kale clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. There has to be another way. A safer way. Zyra placed a hand on his arm, her touch calming. We'll figure it out, she said softly. But for now, we need to keep moving. They emerged from the alleyway and blended into the crowd, doing their best to appear inconspicuous. But as they made their way toward the transport hub, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. His suspicions were confirmed when a group of figures in dark robes appeared at the end of the street. They moved with purpose, their faces obscured by hoods. Kale's heart raced as he recognized the insignia on their robes, the Voron Collective. Zyra, he whispered urgently, pulling her into the shadow of a nearby building. We've got company. Zyra's eyes widened as she spotted the figures. They found us, she said, her voice trembling. Kale's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Fighting wasn't an option. They needed to disappear. This way, he said, leading Zyra down a narrow side street. They moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the empty alley. But as they turned a corner, they found themselves face to face with another group of Vorin agents. "There's no escape," one of the agents said, his voice cold and mechanical. "Surrender the subject, and we'll let you live." Kale stepped in front of Zyra, shielding her with his body. "Over my dead body," he growled. The agent tilted his head, as if considering the offer. "As you wish." Before Kale could react, the agents lunged forward. He braced himself for the impact, but it never came. Instead, a blinding flash of light filled the alleyway, forcing the agents to stagger back. "What the?" Kale began, but Zyra grabbed his arm and pulled him away. "Run," she shouted. They sprinted down the alley, the agents hot on their heels. As they rounded another corner, Zyra suddenly stopped and pressed her hand against a seemingly ordinary wall. A hidden door slid open, revealing a dimly lit passageway. "In here," she said, pulling Kale inside. The door slid shut behind them, plunging them into darkness. Kale's heart pounded as he tried to catch his breath. What just happened?" Zyra's voice was calm but urgent. "This is an old smuggling route. It'll take us to the transport hub without being detected." Kale nodded, though he couldn't see her in the dark. "Let's go." They moved quickly through the passageway, their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. As they walked, Kale couldn't help but wonder how Zyra knew about this route. There was so much he didn't know about her, so many secrets she still kept. Finally, they emerged into a large, bustling terminal. The transport hub was a chaotic maze of ships, vendors, and travelers. Kale felt a surge of hope. If they could just blend in, they might be able to slip away unnoticed. But as they made their way through the crowd, Kale noticed something strange. The travelers around them were whispering, their eyes darting toward Zyra. Some even stepped aside as she passed, as if afraid to get too close. "Zyra," Kale said quietly, "why are they looking at you like that?" Zyra's grip tightened on his arm. "It's the mask," she said. "It marks me as one of the last of my kind. They know what it means." Kale frowned. "And what does it mean?" Zyra hesitated, as if unsure how to explain. "It means I'm a relic," she said finally. "A reminder of a dying species. And now I'm carrying the hope of our survival." Kale's heart ached at the weight of her words. He wanted to say something, to reassure her, but before he could, a loud voice echoed through the terminal. "Attention all travelers. By order of the Vorin Collective, all outgoing flights are hereby suspended until further notice." Kale's blood ran cold. The Vorin Collective had locked down the hub. They were trapped. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zyra's eyes narrowed with determination. "We fight," she said. "We fight for our future." And with that, she pulled him toward a nearby ship, its engines already humming with life. The owner, a grizzled alien with scars across his face, eyed them suspiciously. "You looking for a ride?" he asked. Zyra nodded. "We need to get off this planet. Now." The alien smirked. "It'll cost you." Kale reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of credits. "Will this cover it?" The alien's eyes gleamed as he took the credits. "Welcome aboard." As they boarded the ship, Kale couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. They had escaped the Vorin Collective for now, but he knew their journey was far from over. And as the ship lifted off into the stars, Kale made a silent promise: no matter what lay ahead, he would protect Zyra and their child. No matter the cost.